When a $25 million bounty was approved, it meant one thing: someone powerful had to disappear. She was sent to erase him. Instead, she changed everything. In the underworld, refusal is more dangerous than failure. The city never slept the way people thought it did. It only pretended to. At 2 in the morning, the streets were quieter but sharper, sounds carried farther, movements stood out longer. Windows reflected things that weren't meant to be seen twice. Kira preferred it this way. Fewer variables. Fewer lies. She walked with no destination in mind, hands in her jacket pockets, steps unhurried. Anyone watching would have seen nothing remarkable. Just another woman moving through a restless city. They would have been wrong. Kira measured spaces automatically. Distance between streetlights. Reflections in parked cars. The rhythm of footsteps behind her, not close enough to be a threat, not far enough to be accidental. She adjusted her pace slightly. The footsteps adjusted too. Confirmation. She didn't turn around. People who survived learned early that danger announced itself long before it acted. A pause. A misstep. A moment when the air felt crowded even when the street was empty. She crossed an intersection without breaking stride. The footsteps followed, then stopped. Good. Whoever it was had decided she wasn't worth the trouble. Or that tonight wasn't the night. Kira exhaled slowly, not in relief, but acknowledgement. The world had been like this for a long time now, edges blurring, rules shifting, old systems cracking under the weight of their own secrets. She knew that pattern. She'd lived inside it. Once, she'd believed in clean lines. Missions with names. Targets with faces. Orders that meant something beyond survival. That belief hadn't shattered all at once. It had eroded quietly, professionally, until one day she realized the difference between protection and containment had been deliberately blurred. Some people weren't meant to be saved. They were meant to be managed. And when management failed, they were erased. Kira stopped at a convenience store on the corner, not because she needed anything, but because it was lit, predictable, ordinary. Ordinary places hid extraordinary violence better than dark alleys ever could. She stood by the cooler, pretending to read labels, while her reflection stared back from the glass. Same neutral face. Same steady eyes. Nothing in them that gave her away. That was intentional. Somewhere out there, families were still moving. Money was still changing hands, loyalty traded like currency. Decisions were being made by men who never pulled the trigger themselves, but always decided who bled. She could feel it in the way the city held its breath, like it knew something was coming, but didn't know where it would land. Kira reached for a drink she didn't really want. That was when the glass shattered inward. The glass shattered before the sound reached her. Not the dramatic kind, the soft, inward collapse that meant the bullet had already passed through. Kira reacted on instinct. She moved before the cashier screamed, before the 2 masked men by the counter understood what had changed. Her hand knocked the drink from the shelf as she stepped sideways, liquid exploding across the floor where her head had been a second earlier. Another shot cracked through the store, this one tearing into the refrigerator behind her, sparks flaring like fireflies. Sniper. Not a robbery. The gunman closest to her turned too late. Kira closed the distance in 3 steps, her elbow snapping up into his jaw, the impact precise and controlled. He dropped without a sound. His partner reached for his weapon. She twisted his wrist, redirected the barrel toward the ceiling, and drove her knee into his thigh. Bone gave. He folded. Outside, tires screeched. Kira didn't wait to see who was watching. She slipped through the back door, vanished into the alley, and was gone before police sirens cut through the night. By morning, the footage was everywhere. Grainy security video. A woman in plain clothes. Movements too fast, too clean. Commentators argued whether it was luck or training. No one knew her name. But someone recognized the pattern. 3 days later, across the city, a man sat in silence while his world fractured. Park Jun-hyuk stared at the body on the floor of his private garage. His head of security lay face down between 2 black sedans, blood pooled neatly beneath him as if someone had taken the time to make it orderly. There was no sign of struggle. No forced entry. That was the problem. Jun Hyuk had ruled his syndicate for 20 years by knowing who to trust, who to buy, and who had to disappear to keep the families in line. Now, the man who slept outside his door was dead, and no one could explain how it happened. His lieutenant shifted uneasily. "It wasn't one of ours." Jun Hyuk didn't respond. He already knew. The message arrived an hour later, whispered through underworld channels that never existed on paper. A syndicate bounty, $25 million placed in escrow before dawn. Not a rumor. Not a threat. A promise backed by families who expected results. Men whose names were never spoken twice. Enough money to draw killers who didn't miss, and to make loyal men hesitate about who they were loyal to. At that price, even old debts started to feel flexible. Someone wanted him erased badly enough to approve a number no syndicate used lightly. 25 million meant one thing: this wasn't punishment. It was a cleanup. Not arrested. Not humiliated. Erased. Jun Hyuk tightened his grip on the glass in his hand. The empire he'd built, shipping, logistics, real estate, stood on a foundation of secrets. And secrets, once exposed, had a way of pulling entire structures down. He ordered the compound sealed. No visitors. No movements without clearance. And still, he slept with one eye open. When Kira arrived at the gates 2 days later, the guards laughed. She stood alone, hands visible, dressed in neutral colors. No entourage. No weapon in sight. The security cameras tracked her approach, zooming in, searching for threat. They saw a woman. They missed everything else. Interviews over, one of the guards said in English, smirking. "You're in the wrong place." Kira met his gaze, expression unreadable. "I was invited." He snorted. "By who?" "By a man who doesn't sleep anymore." The laughter died. They escorted her inside, hands never far from their guns. Every step through the compound told her a story, camera angles too predictable, patrol routes designed for intimidation rather than defense, guards watching each other instead of the perimeter. Fear lived here now, the kind that settled into mafia houses when loyalty started cracking from the inside. Park Jun-hyuk waited in a sparsely furnished room overlooking the city. He didn't stand when she entered. "You're late," he said. "You're alive," Kira replied. "For now." The guards bristled. One stepped forward. Jun-hyuk raised a hand. His eyes stayed on her. Sharp. Measuring. "Why should I trust you?" "You shouldn't," she said. "Trust gets people killed." Silence stretched. He leaned back in his chair. "You have no reputation. No allies. No leverage." Kira tilted her head slightly. "You're still breathing. That's my leverage." Something flickered behind his eyes. Anger. Interest. Maybe both. "What do you want?" he asked. 5 days, she said. "Total control of your security. No interference. And after 5 days? If you're still alive, you pay me. If not," she shrugged. "Then it won't matter." The guards exploded in protest. Jun-hyuk silenced them with a glance. "You're arrogant." "No," Kira said softly. "I'm efficient." He studied her a long moment, then asked the question that mattered. "Why non-lethal?" She met his gaze without hesitation. "Because dead men don't talk. And whoever wants you gone is hiding behind other people." Jun-hyuk exhaled slowly. Pride warred with survival. Survival won. The lockdown began that night. Kira addressed the staff herself. Calm. Direct. "Anyone who wants to leave," she said, "can go now. No questions. No consequences." Murmurs rippled through the room. "And anyone who stays," she continued, "understands that this place becomes a closed system. No phones. No outside contact. No exceptions." Some left immediately. Some hesitated. Kira watched carefully. By dawn, 60% remained. She remembered every face. The compound changed under her hands. Not visibly, not at first. Lights adjusted. Doors delayed by half a second longer than before. Cameras repositioned to overlap blind spots. Pressure plates hidden beneath rugs. Flash systems wired into hallways. Nothing lethal. Everything deliberate. Guards complained quietly. She ignored them. On the 3rd night, someone tested her. A routine meal delivery. One tray slightly heavier than the rest. Kira intercepted it, swapped it with another without breaking stride, and watched from the shadows as the intended target collapsed instead. Not dead, just unconscious. She secured the traitor before anyone noticed he was missing. Information first, justice later. Jun Hyuk confronted her that evening. You don't tell me when you move my people. I don't need permission to keep you alive, Kira replied. You're turning my house into a prison. She stepped closer, voice low. Someone already did. I'm just showing you the bars. He didn't argue. Because deep down, he knew she was right. On the fifth night, the city held its breath. Kira stood alone in the control room, eyes scanning feeds that no longer showed what attackers expected to see. She had left doors unlocked on purpose. Let them come. Somewhere far away, a decision had already been made. And soon, everyone would pay for it. If this story has you leaning closer, if the tension already has its grip on you, supporting the channel helps more than you know. Like, comment, and subscribe to AFROSEOUL Tales for more cinematic stories where power, loyalty, and survival collide. Morning came without relief. The compound looked the same from the outside, clean lines, quiet courtyards, guards standing where they always had. Inside, tension coiled through every corridor like live wire. Kira barely slept. She didn't need to. She walked the perimeter at dawn, boots silent on stone, replaying the previous night frame by frame. No alarms. No forced entries. No external probes. Whoever was coming wasn't rushing. They were waiting for her to settle into rhythm. That was fine. She preferred rhythm. In the security room, monitors glowed softly. Movement patterns unfolded like a living map, guards, staff, routines. She watched not for action, but for hesitation. The man who paused before turning corners. The woman who checked doors twice. The guard whose gaze lingered a second too long on exit routes. Fear told the truth faster than loyalty ever did. Behind her, Jun Hyuk entered quietly. You haven't slept, he said. I slept enough, Kira replied without turning. You're certain there are more traitors? I'm certain someone thinks I haven't noticed them yet. He studied the screens. How many? Kira considered. 3. Maybe 4. His jaw tightened. Names. Not yet. If I expose them now, they disappear. If I wait, she tapped the screen where a hallway camera fed into darkness. They lead me to who they're really working for. Jun Hyuk let out a slow breath. You're using my people as bait. I'm using patterns, she said. People choose for themselves. Silence stretched between them. Finally, he nodded once. Do what you have to do. It wasn't permission. It was surrender. By afternoon, the first probe came. Not an attack. A test. A courier arrived with sealed documents marked urgent, customs clearance issues at one of Jun Hyuk's shipping ports. Routine enough. Except the seal had been reseated. Barely noticeable. Kira intercepted it, scanned the paper fibers, then handed it off untouched. The courier left. 2 hours later, one of the guards accessed a restricted terminal he'd never used before. Kira followed the data trail. Encrypted pings. Foreign routing. Not a gang signature. Too clean. Too disciplined. This wasn't underworld business. She isolated the channel and let it breathe. That night, when the guard tried to leave his post early, she was waiting. He didn't reach for his weapon. He just sagged. They told me it was about balance, he whispered, voice shaking. That you were destabilizing things. Kira restrained him methodically. Who's they? He shook his head. I never saw them. Just instructions. Payments. Where did the money come from? He hesitated. Kira leaned closer. This is your last chance to be useful. His eyes filled with tears. Government accounts. Black sites. I thought, he broke. I thought we were being protected. Kira closed her eyes briefly. That word again. Protected. She didn't tell Jun Hyuk everything. Not yet. Some truths needed timing. Instead, she changed the game. She adjusted patrol routes so they appeared sloppy. Delayed camera feeds by seconds. Left one external service gate unguarded during shift changes. She wanted them confident. Overconfident. By the third day, tension inside the compound reached a breaking point. Hang Min-jae, Jun Hyuk's cousin and second-in-command, cornered her near the armory. You think we don't see what you're doing? He snapped. Turning us against each other. Making us paranoid. Kira didn't slow. Paranoia keeps people alive. You're not one of us. No, she agreed. That's why I can see what you won't. He stepped into her path. You think you're untouchable because he hired you. Kira finally stopped. She met his glare calmly. I think you're angry because you don't know who to trust anymore. His hand twitched. She continued softly, if I wanted him dead, he'd already be dead. That landed harder than any threat. She walked past him without another word. That evening, Jun Hyuk's sister arrived unannounced. Park Seo-yoon moved like someone used to rooms changing when she entered them. Her expression was composed, eyes sharp with intelligence rather than fear. You didn't tell me you'd hired outside help, she said coolly. Jun Hyuk stiffened. This wasn't your concern. It becomes my concern when national security is threatened, she replied. Kira watched from the edge of the room, noting posture, micro-expressions, the way Seo-yoon's gaze catalogued exits before resting on her. They assessed each other instantly. You're the bodyguard, Seo-yoon said. Temporary, Kira replied. Seo-yoon smiled faintly. All dangerous things are. The conversation that followed was polite on the surface, tense beneath. Seo-yoon spoke of stability, of transitions, of how certain empires became liabilities if they didn't evolve. Jun Hyuk bristled. Kira listened. Seo-yoon wasn't lying, but she wasn't telling the whole truth either. When she left, Kira spoke quietly. She's involved. Jun Hyuk's voice hardened. Be careful. I am, Kira said. That's why I'm still breathing. The fourth night brought movement beyond the walls. Kira detected it before the alarms, thermal signatures too disciplined to be local. Scouts mapping response times. Professionals. She didn't stop them. She watched. They withdrew just before dawn, satisfied. That was the mistake. In the control room, Kira mapped everything they'd touched. The routes they'd avoided. The signals they'd sent. They weren't preparing an assault. They were coordinating something bigger. She decrypted a fragment of intercepted transmission. Not names. Not locations. Just a directive. Proceed as planned. Asset expendable. Asset. Not target. She felt the weight of it settle in her chest. Jun Hyuk wasn't meant to be the end. He was meant to be erased quietly, so something else could continue untouched. By morning, Kira made her decision. She gathered the remaining loyal staff. There will be an attack, she said. No drama. No reassurance. Some of you will be used by people you trust. If you stay, you follow my instructions exactly. If you leave now, you walk away alive. No one moved. That told her everything. She turned to Jun Hyuk. Tonight, you stop being the center of this. He frowned. What does that mean? It means, she said, they think they're coming for you. And they're not. She met his gaze steadily. They're coming for the truth. As night fell, Kira activated the final phase. False intel leaked outward. Weak points advertised. Guards rotated into positions that looked careless but weren't. The compound became a stage set for an audience that didn't realize it was being watched. In the darkness beyond the walls, engines idled. Somewhere far away, someone approved the operation. And the countdown began. The compound settled into an unnatural stillness as night crept closer. Not calm. Contained. Kira noticed it in the way doors closed a fraction faster than usual. In the way voices dropped even when no one else was around. Fear didn't always scream. Sometimes it whispered itself into routine. She walked the inner perimeter alone, boots quiet against stone, eyes flicking to shadows others had learned to ignore. Every security system she'd installed was functioning. Every trap was dormant. That worried her more than malfunction ever would. Because it meant the enemy was waiting. In the east wing, 2 guards stood at their post longer than required. Neither spoke. One wiped his palms repeatedly against his trousers, even though the night air was cool. Kira stopped several meters away. You're off rotation, she said calmly. The taller one blinked. We thought. You thought staying longer would make you safer, she finished. Silence stretched. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. Fear makes people predictable. That's how mistakes happen. The shorter guard swallowed. Are they coming tonight? Kira studied his face. Honest fear. No deceit. Yes. The taller one stiffened. Then why aren't you stopping it? I am, she said. Just not the way you expect. She dismissed them with a nod and continued down the corridor, leaving behind two men who suddenly understood that survival wasn't about firepower, it was about control. In the control room, the monitors glowed softly, bathing the space in muted blues and greens. Kira stood still, hands resting lightly on the console, watching patterns shift in near imperceptible ways. Someone inside the compound had just accessed a terminal they didn't need. Someone else had hesitated before sending a routine report. Tiny fractures. She logged them without reaction. Trust, she knew, wasn't something that broke loudly. It fractured quietly, spreading through structures until collapse became inevitable. Behind her, Jun-hyuk entered without announcement. You're letting this drag on, he said. Kira didn't turn. No. I'm letting it ripen. You're comfortable with this much uncertainty? She finally looked at him. You built an empire on uncertainty. I'm just redirecting it. He crossed his arms, gaze hard. People are scared. They should be, she replied. Fear sharpens attention. Comfort dulls it. He studied her for a long moment. And you? What about me? Are you afraid? Kira considered the question honestly. Not of tonight, she said. I've survived worse. What then? She turned back to the screens. Of patterns repeating. He didn't ask her to explain. Some answers weren't meant to be unpacked. Later, alone, Kira stood in a service corridor she'd deliberately left unguarded. The lights hummed softly overhead. Any trained operative would notice the absence immediately. She wanted them to. She pressed her fingers briefly against the wall, feeling the vibration of distant machinery. For a split second, memory surfaced uninvited, another corridor, another operation, another time when containment had failed and someone had decided erasure was easier than accountability. She pushed it away. This wasn't that mission. This time, she controlled the variables. A soft sound echoed behind her. Not footsteps. Breathing. Kira turned smoothly, already moving. The man froze when he realized she'd known he was there all along. His weapon remained holstered. His pulse betrayed him. I was just checking, he began. Don't, she said quietly. His eyes flicked toward the exits. They said you wouldn't notice. Kira stepped closer. Who's they? His jaw tightened. She didn't press further. Not yet. Instead, she said, go back to your post. Do exactly what you're told tonight. And when this is over, decide who you want to be. She watched him retreat, shoulders hunched, carrying the weight of a choice he hadn't expected to make. Near midnight, the compound lights dimmed automatically. Kira stood in the control room as external sensors registered movement beyond the walls, brief, calculated, probing. She didn't react. She let them see what she wanted them to see. She let them believe the house was tired. The city beyond the compound pulsed with unaware life. Cars passed. Windows glowed. Somewhere nearby, someone laughed. Inside, everyone waited. Kira adjusted one final setting, then removed her earpiece and set it carefully on the console. No more preparation. No more analysis. Only execution remained. Outside the walls, engines idled. And the night leaned in to listen. The first breach happened without sound. No alarms. No explosions. Just a camera feed flickering once before returning to normal, too normal. Kira saw it immediately. She didn't react. That was the mistake most people made. They thought the absence of chaos meant safety. Kira knew better. Silence was the loudest signal there was. She adjusted the feeds manually, peeling back the false image layered over the real one. For heat signatures slipped through the Eastern Service corridor, bodies tight to the walls, movements synchronized. Professionals. No wasted motion. She marked them blue. Phase 1, she murmured. They moved exactly as she'd predicted, avoiding the obvious paths, steering clear of kill zones meant for amateurs. They thought they were smarter than the house. They weren't smarter than her. The first man went down when the floor shifted beneath him, not collapsing, just tilting enough to throw off balance. Kira didn't watch the impact. She watched the others react. Two rushed forward. One froze. Freeze response. Fear spike. Good. A strobe burst ignited the corridor in white light. Not long enough to blind, long enough to disorient. Kira counted heartbeats as they staggered. Then a door sealed behind them with a soft hydraulic hiss. She sealed the corridor. Not a kill zone. A holding pen. On the north side of the compound, a second team breached the wall using a suppressed thermal cutter. Clean. Efficient. They slipped through and split into pairs, each man trusting the other with his blind spot. Kira watched them funnel toward the guest wing, exactly where the leaked intel said Junhyuk would be. He wasn't. She'd moved him an hour earlier, into a space no one would choose unless they understood old buildings and human psychology. Basements scared people. Attackers hated them. Which made them perfect. Hang Minjae made his mistake 10 minutes into the assault. He broke formation. Against orders, against logic, against the quiet discipline Kira had drilled into them. He moved toward the main office, weapon raised, jaw clenched. Kira saw his pulse spike on the monitor. Fear. Or guilt. She intercepted him at the stairwell before he could reach the door. "What are you doing?" she demanded quietly. "Ending this," he snapped. "You think I don't see what you've done? You've turned this place into a trap." "Yes," Kira said evenly. "For them." His finger tightened on the trigger. For a fraction of a second, Kira considered breaking his arm. Instead, she stepped aside. "Go," she said. "If you're right." He hesitated. That hesitation saved his life. A suppressed shot cracked through the stairwell, shattering concrete inches from where his head had been. Hang Minjae dropped instinctively. Kira was already moving. She located the shooter through sound and shadow, closed the distance before he could adjust. One strike to the throat. One to the knee. The man crumpled, gasping. Alive. Hang Minjae stared at her, shaking. "They were watching me," he whispered. "Yes," Kira said. "And now they know you're compromised." She secured the attacker and turned back to the monitors. The assault was escalating. By midnight, the compound was fully engaged. Teams hit from 3 directions. Some with military discipline. Others sloppier, mercenaries drawn by the kind of money that erased borders and reputations at the same time. They didn't coordinate well. That worked against them. Kira split her attention between feeds and movement, directing loyal guards into positions that looked exposed but weren't. She let attackers push forward just far enough to feel confident. Then she took that confidence away. Gas, not lethal, not choking, just enough to slow reaction times. Sound bursts that scrambled coordination. Floors that locked boots in place for half a second too long. Every second mattered. Attackers shouted orders that went unanswered. Some tried to retreat. They couldn't. In the basement, Junhyuk listened to the sounds above him. Not gunfire. Not chaos. Controlled disruption. "You're sure she knows what she's doing?" one of the remaining guards whispered. Junhyuk didn't answer immediately. He thought of the way Kira had looked at him the first day. Not impressed. Not afraid. Just certain. "Yes," he said finally. "I'm sure." Kira caught the anomaly just after 1 in the morning. A signal spike from inside the compound. Not an intruder. One of hers. She traced it quickly, fingers flying across the console. Park Seo-yoon. Junhyuk's sister. Kira felt the shift in the air before the truth fully formed. Seo-yoon wasn't coordinating the attack. She was redirecting it. Kira opened the channel remotely, listening without revealing herself. "You're moving too early," Seo-yoon said calmly. "The exposure isn't complete." A voice replied, filtered, distorted. "He's becoming unstable. This ends tonight. Collateral will be unacceptable." "He's already collateral." Kira cut the feed. So that was it. Not vengeance. Containment. She moved fast. She rerouted the remaining attackers toward the western corridor, isolating them from Seo-yoon's signals. She shut down external comms entirely, forcing the operation into chaos. Then she went to Junhyuk. "You have a choice," she said when she reached him. "Right now." He looked up sharply. "What choice?" "You can stay hidden and let me end this quietly," she said. "Or you can confront her and burn every bridge you've been standing on." He didn't hesitate. "I'm tired of shadows," he said. I want to see who's holding the strings. Kira nodded once. Then she handed him a vest. Stay behind me, she said. And don't argue. They reached the upper level just as the final wave hit the outer gate. Kira stopped at the doorway, eyes scanning, body perfectly still. She could feel it now, the rhythm of the fight. The way everything narrowed to breath and motion. This was what she'd been trained for. Not killing. Control. She stepped forward. And the night answered her. The western corridor erupted in movement. Not chaos, calculated desperation. The attackers realized too late they'd been funneled. Routes they thought were exits sealed behind them with mechanical finality. Lights dropped to emergency red, pulsing like a heartbeat under stress. Kira moved through it like a shadow slipping between beats. She didn't rush. Rushing made mistakes. The first man lunged from cover, blade flashing. She deflected, redirected his momentum, and drove him into the wall hard enough to knock the breath from his lungs. He slid down, unconscious before he hit the floor. Two more advanced together, trained to overwhelm through proximity. She let them get close. Then she broke the rhythm. A flash detonated between them, not blinding, just disorienting. She stepped inside their reach, joints locking under pressure, tendons screaming as leverage did the rest. Both went down alive, confused, terrified. Behind her, Junhyuk watched silently. He had ordered violence his entire life. He had never seen control like this. At the central junction, Park Seo-yoon stood waiting. She wasn't armed. She didn't need to be. You've made a mess, Seo-yoon said calmly, her gaze flicking briefly to the unconscious bodies around them. This was meant to be contained. People always say that after it isn't, Kira replied. Seo-yoon's eyes hardened. You don't understand what's at stake. Junhyuk stepped forward. Then explain it to me. My own sister. Seo-yoon exhaled slowly, as if bracing herself. Your empire is a liability. Not because of what you do, but because of what you know. There are operations buried inside your networks that shouldn't exist. If they surface, governments fall. And killing me fixes that? Junhyuk demanded. No, she said quietly. Removing you does. Kira shifted slightly, placing herself between them. You're not in control anymore. Seo-yoon looked at her fully now. You think you are? No, Kira said. But I know who isn't. She tapped her earpiece once. Across the compound, doors sealed. The remaining attackers realized the truth at the same moment. They had been abandoned. The final resistance broke quickly after that. Some surrendered when they realized extraction wasn't coming. Others fought harder, anger replacing discipline. Kira adapted without hesitation, using the environment, using their mistakes, ending every confrontation the same way, alive, restrained, neutralized. By the time the last body hit the floor, the compound was quiet again. Too quiet. In the control room, Kira opened the channels she'd been collecting all night. Data spilled across the screens, financial transfers, encrypted directives, command hierarchies that bypassed borders and flags. Names appeared. Not public ones. Operational ones. Seo-yoon stared at the evidence, jaw tight. This doesn't end them, she said. No, Kira agreed. But it exposes them. Junhyuk watched silently. Years of paranoia crystallized into clarity. They were never protecting the country, he said. They were protecting themselves. Seo-yoon closed her eyes. When she opened them again, something had shifted. You'll destroy everything, she said. Kira met her gaze evenly. No, I'm giving you a choice. Help dismantle it, or watch it burn without you. Seo-yoon looked at her brother. Then she nodded. By dawn, the first arrests began, quiet, surgical. Information leaked into places the families couldn't silence. Investigations sparked across jurisdictions that had been paid not to speak, and suddenly couldn't afford to stay quiet. Panic traveled faster than loyalty ever had. Junhyuk stood on the balcony as the sun rose, the city stretching endlessly beneath him. You planned this, he said to Kira. From the beginning. I planned for survival, she replied. What you do with it is up to you. He turned to her. Stay. Help me rebuild. Kira shook her head. You don't need me for what comes next. And what's that? Legitimacy, she said. That fight has rules I don't belong in. He studied her, then nodded once. Respect. Kira left before the news fully broke. No farewell. No witnesses. Just another face in the morning crowd. But far away, in places without names, people stared at screens with tightening jaws. The asset hadn't been erased. And $25 million sat untouched in escrow, money no one could claim without exposing themselves. The truth had slipped through. And somewhere in the shadows, new plans were already forming. Because wars like this never really ended. They just changed shape. News never arrived all at once. It leaked. First as whispers in financial circles. Then as sealed indictments. Then as carefully worded press releases that avoided certain names while implying others. Markets reacted before the public understood why. Inside the compound, the evidence was gone. Not destroyed, secured, distributed, duplicated in places where silence couldn't be enforced. Junhyuk moved through the aftermath like a man relearning the weight of his own shadow. Orders he gave now carried different consequences. He shut down routes, sold assets, cut off old bloodlines, dismantled pieces of the structure that had once made him untouchable. Some of his people left. Some stayed. Those who stayed understood the cost. Park Seo-yoon resigned 2 weeks later. Officially, it was a personal decision. Unofficially, it was an admission. She disappeared into advisory roles that kept her visible enough to survive and distant enough to avoid questions she couldn't answer. The sister he'd known was gone. What remained was something quieter. More dangerous. The compound reopened under a different name. Security shifted from intimidation to discretion, the kind that kept families watching but not knocking. Contracts were audited. Shell companies folded into transparent entities. It was not redemption, it was insulation. Junhyuk didn't call it change. He called it survival. Far from the city, Kira watched none of it. She moved through places where names didn't matter. Airports, bus terminals, temporary rooms with curtains that never quite closed. She avoided mirrors. Not because she didn't like what she saw, but because she didn't need reminders. The world kept spinning. Spectre didn't vanish. Organizations like that never did. They fractured, adapted, re-embedded themselves behind new language and new faces. But now they were cautious. Someone had reminded them that assets could think. One evening, weeks later, Kira stopped in a small cafe just off a transit route. She ordered tea, sat near the window, and watched people move through ordinary lives. A news segment flickered on a muted screen above the counter. A multinational logistics firm announced a restructuring. New leadership. New compliance measures. Analysts argued whether it would hold. Kira finished her drink. She didn't smile. But she didn't look away either. Elsewhere, Junhyuk stood alone in his office, no guards inside now, just distance and glass. He replayed the moment she'd handed him the vest, the certainty in her eyes. Control. Not domination. He understood it now. When the secure line rang, he answered without hesitation. Yes, he said. I'm listening. Kira stepped back into the night. There would be other jobs. Other cities. Other shadows that needed light in the wrong places. She didn't think of herself as a hero. Heroes stayed. She was something else. A correction. The families adjusted quietly. And somewhere deep inside networks built on blood and silence, a new fear took root. Not of violence, but of exposure. Weeks later, fragments of the truth surfaced in places no one could fully contain. Not everything. Never everything. But enough to change behavior. Enough to remind the people who operated in shadows that shadows only existed as long as light was controlled. Someone somewhere would try to rebuild what had been exposed. They always did. But now they would do it knowing one thing they hadn't before. Systems could be watched from the inside. Assets could refuse their roles. And silence was no longer guaranteed. The world didn't become safer. It became more honest. And for some, that was far more dangerous. If you stayed till the end, you already understand stories like this don't end when the screen goes dark. Support AFROSEOUL Tales by liking, commenting, and subscribing. More cinematic stories of power, loyalty, and survival are coming.